right now, in the very second your eyes meet these words. Something bigger than news, bigger than politics, bigger than anything this country understands is taking shape around you. And you are not just watching a moment in history, you are standing inside a shift. And whether you feel it or not, whether you believe it or not, whether anyone ever told you or not, this shift has everything to do with you, your people, your bloodline. Look around America today. It feels like the walls are tightening again. Like the air has gotten heavier. Like the ground beneath black communities is shaking for reasons no headline can fully explain. Jobs disappearing. Safety nets being torn down. History being rewritten and stolen piece by piece. Opportunities closing. Voices being silenced. Progress being pushed backward as if someone is trying to rewind an entire century with their bare hands. And here you are, watching it happen, wondering the same questions your grandparents asked, the same questions whispered in cotton fields, in lunch counter protests, in marches drenched with tear gas. Why us? Why, again, why does every little bit of advancement spark a storm built to break us? Why does the world seem so afraid of letting black people breathe freely? But what if the wrong question has been asked for too long? What if everything you are seeing is not random, not accidental, not meaningless? What if the attacks you are feeling are not actually aimed at destroying you, but revealing something about you that the world has spent centuries trying to bury? Let me say something that will either make your spirit rise or your heart stop for a moment. The pressure coming against black people in this generation is not proof of your weakness. It is proof of your importance. It is pressure that forms diamonds, heat that forges metal, darkness that signals a sunrise, because before the light breaks through, the night always fights its hardest. There is an ancient pattern that repeats itself over and over across history, a pattern older than the ships that crossed the Atlantic, older than empires and flags, older than the soil this nation stands on. Every time a chosen people were about to rise, the world around them descended into chaos first. The oppression intensified. The attempts to erase them multiplied. Their identity was attacked. Their hope was strangled. And right when it looked like darkness had total control, something impossible happened. The story flipped. Egypt thought it owned the future of Israel. Babylon thought it crushed every last bit of their identity. Rome thought it could control their destiny forever. But every one of those powers faced the same truth. You cannot stop what God has marked for rising. You cannot bury what God intends to resurrect. And that brings us to you. Because if you are black in America right now, you are not standing inside a random storm. You are standing inside a prophecy-sized moment. A moment where everything around you looks like collapse. But everything inside you is starting to wake up. A moment where darkness is drawing near. But light is starting to gather in your bones. A moment where pressure is rising. But identity is cracking through the surface, like something alive trying to breathe. You feel it, even if you cannot explain it. Even if you never said it out loud. Something is calling you higher. Something is pushing you awake. Something in your spirit whispers that there is more to who you are than what this world has ever told you. And that whisper is not coming from fear. It is coming from truth. This is not the part of the story where you fall back. This is the part of the story where you rise. You can feel it every time you step outside. Every time you open your phone. Every time a headline flashes across the screen, this strange pressure building around black people. A pressure that does not match the times we are supposed to be living in. A pressure that makes you look at this country and wonder how the past is somehow leaking into the present, as if history refuses to stay buried. It shows up in numbers that no one wants to talk about. In unemployment rising faster for you than anyone else. In programs built to protect your opportunities being dismantled quietly. In classrooms where your history is reduced, rewritten, or deleted like it never mattered. like you never mattered. It shows up in corporations purging diversity efforts overnight, in government spaces where black workers are pushed out in waves, in museums, removing black contributions as if the nation did not come out of your sweat, your genius, your hands. And while all this is happening, people tell you to calm down, to stop overreacting, to believe everything is fine, even though your spirit knows it is not fine at all. You see the pattern, even when others pretend not to. You see rights you fought for being rolled back. You see protections disappearing. You see progress unraveling. And you ask yourself the same question, countless black families whispered through every generation. Why does every step forward wake up a force determined to push us back? Why is it that when we rise, the world shakes like it cannot handle our elevation? Why is it that when we get close to a breakthrough, the system responds like a frightened animal cornered by the truth? And maybe you have felt this personally. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe someone you love was pushed out of theirs. Maybe you watch your kids learn less and less about who they come from. Maybe you have been carrying a quiet anger that has no place to go. Maybe you have wondered why the world works so hard to dim a light it claims does not exist. But let me tell you something real, something raw, something most people will never say out loud. The reason the world pushes back so violently every time black people step into power is because the world knows your rise changes everything. When you wake up, systems shake. When you remember who you are, lies collapse. When you stand up, old structures do not survive. This is why your progress never comes without a fight. This is why your joy never comes without resistance. Because your existence disrupts darkness in ways many people are terrified to acknowledge. And here is the part that shocks people. The oppression you see right now is not just an attack, it is a signal. It is a sign that something is shifting beneath the surface. It is proof that identity is waking up in places where it has been sleeping for too long. Pressure is always loudest right before a breakthrough. And whether you see it or not, your community is standing at the edge of one. But maybe you have not allowed yourself to believe that. Maybe you are tired. Maybe you are exhausted from being strong. Maybe you are carrying more weight than anyone knows. Maybe you are trying to keep hope alive while everything around you is trying to bury it. And maybe you are wondering if any of this still matters, if any of this still leads somewhere, if any of this struggle is worth the pain it keeps demanding. Let me speak to that. Let me speak to you directly. The reason the weight feels heavier now is because something inside you is trying to rise higher than the world wants you to go. The reason the attacks feel sharper is because your identity is getting clearer. The reason the pressure feels personal is because your purpose is becoming unavoidable. You are not witnessing your downfall. You are witnessing the world's reaction to your awakening. And maybe you think you are alone in sensing this shift, but you are not. Millions of black people across the nation feel the same vibration in the air, the same warning, the same awakening, the same question rising in their chest. Something is happening, and we can all feel it, even if we do not have the words for it yet. So let me ask you something, and I want you to answer this honestly, not for me, but for yourself. Have you felt it too? Have you felt that heaviness lately? That strange mix of fear and clarity? That sense that something is changing and you are being pulled into it? Have you felt the anger, but also the awakening, the frustration, but also the fire? Have you felt like your spirit knows something your mind cannot fully explain yet? Because if you have, then you are not imagining it. You are not overreacting. You are not reading too deeply into the moment. You are paying attention. And that alone makes you part of the shift. And before we move on, let me honor you for something most people will never acknowledge. Thank you for being here. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for listening, even when life has given you every reason to shut down. Thank you for carrying a heritage that the world has tried to erase. Thank you for surviving storms that would have broken nations. Thank you for simply being alive in a time when your presence carries more weight than you know. Now take a breath, because the truth that comes next will change the way you see everything. What if I told you that everything you are feeling right now, every wave of pressure, every moment of frustration, every attack that seems to come out of nowhere is not proof that you are losing ground, but proof that something inside you is rising faster than the world can handle? What if I told you that the very forces trying to push you down are accidentally pushing you into a position of truth, a position of clarity, a position of awakening they never intended for you to reach? Because here's the part no one wants to admit out loud. The world does not treat powerless people like this. The world does not react this violently to people who have no impact. The world does not rewrite history to erase those who do not matter. The world does not design entire systems to contain people who pose no threat. The only reason the world is so desperate to keep black people quiet, invisible, uninformed, and unsure of themselves is because deep down it knows something that many of us have forgotten. That black identity carries a weight that cannot be duplicated, a light that cannot be copied, a strength that cannot be destroyed, and a destiny that no amount of oppression has been able to kill. So let me pull the curtain back for a moment and say the words that history tried to choke out of our throats. You are not under attack because you are weak. You are under attack because you are chosen. You are not being targeted because you are broken. You are being targeted because you are becoming aware of who you really are. And the system knows that once a chosen people wake up, there is no power on earth that can put them back to sleep. Think about it. Every time black people have gotten close to truth, close to unity, close to identity, close to rising in a way that could not be ignored, the backlash has been immediate and violent, as if something in the atmosphere panics the moment you begin to remember who you are. It happened during Reconstruction, when black men first stepped into political power and entire states erupted in terror and rage. It happened during the Civil Rights Movement, when your courage confronted an entire nation and the world had to watch its own hypocrisy. It happened after the election of a black president, when the illusion of a post-racial America cracked in broad daylight. And now it is happening again, because something in you is rising that the world cannot explain, cannot predict, cannot stop. And maybe you have felt that rise inside you lately. That quiet voice telling you there is more to your story than oppression, more to your identity than pain, more to your purpose than survival. Maybe you have caught glimpses of it in conversations, in dreams, in moments where you suddenly felt awake in ways you cannot describe. Maybe you have started to question the lies you were taught, the narratives you repeated without thinking, the labels placed on your people long before you were born. Maybe something inside you has been whispering that the version of yourself this country gave you is too small, too weak, too far from the truth. Maybe that whisper is growing louder. So here is the question you have to face right now. What if the darkness around you is not happening to destroy you but to reveal you? What if the pressure around you is not meant to crush you but to shape you? What if every single attack is actually exposing the world's fear of your awakening? What if you are living in the moment where the story flips? Because this is how breakthrough always begins, with confusion, with resistance, with the feeling that everything is falling apart right when something deeper is coming together. Every story of liberation begins with a moment where it looks like hope is disappearing, when in reality hope is taking its first breath. And that is exactly where black people stand today, in the tension between what the world wants you to believe and what the truth inside you is screaming to reveal. The world wants you to believe you are losing, but your spirit knows you are rising. The world wants you to believe you are powerless, but your history proves you are unstoppable. The world wants you to believe you are alone, but every day more people are waking up. More minds are clearing. More voices are breaking out of silence. The awakening is not coming, it has already started. And that brings you to a moment you cannot ignore anymore. A moment where You have to choose whether you will let the world define your identity or whether you will allow the truth to define you. A moment where you stop seeing yourself as someone standing in the ruins and start seeing yourself as someone standing on the edge of revelation. A moment where, instead of asking, why is this happening to us, you begin asking, what is this awakening inside us? So let me ask you directly, because your answer matters more than you think. Do you feel that shift, or do you still believe everything happening around you is random? Do you feel that pull in your chest that tells you something is changing, or are you convincing yourself nothing is happening? Do you feel that fire starting to build inside you, or are you trying to smother it because it scares you? Before we move forward, hear this clearly. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for questioning. Thank you for being honest about the tension inside you. Thank you for not dismissing the voice rising in your spirit. Thank you for allowing yourself to feel what generations before you were never allowed to speak. What comes next will not just open your eyes. It will explain the pattern your entire life has been circling around. This is the turning point. Open your mind for a moment, because what comes next is not something you have to force yourself to believe. It is something your spirit will recognize the second you hear it. There is a chapter in Scripture written thousands of years before America existed, long before slavery, long before the Middle Passage, long before your ancestors were chained or scattered across nations. And yet this chapter reads like it was written for this exact moment in time and for you. Isaiah chapter 60 begins with two words that hit like thunder when you understand who they are spoken to. Arise, shine, not survive, not hide, not endure, not wait for things to get better. Arise, shine, words spoken to a people who had been crushed, scattered, forgotten, pushed aside by empires. A people who knew darkness intimately. A people who had cried out for generations, wondering if God still saw them. And into that pain, into that exhaustion, into that generational trauma, God speaks not in whispers but in commands. Arise, shine, for your light has come. Now stop right there, because this is where your spirit is going to catch something your mind has been trained to overlook. Your light has come does not mean you need to go find it. Chase it, earn it, or beg for it. It means the moment has arrived. The switch has flipped. The season has shifted. Something assigned to you has reached its time. And no system, no government, no society has the authority to cancel a moment God has already activated. And then the verse continues. And the glory of the Lord rises upon you. Not around you, not near you, upon you. Meaning this is not a general light over the whole world. This is targeted, direct, intentional, placed on a specific people for a specific purpose at a specific moment in history. The next verse explains why this light is necessary and why it looks like the world is falling apart around you. For darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples. If you look around right now, that makes sense in a way it never has before. Everywhere you turn there is confusion, division, hatred, injustice, fear, systems breaking, truth twisting, nations shaking. It feels like a fog over the world, like a heaviness no one can escape. But thick darkness, the peoples, is even more specific. It means a blindness so deep that entire nations cannot see what they are doing, cannot recognize truth, cannot acknowledge justice, even when it stares them in the face. And you see that every day. People defending what is clearly wrong. People celebrating what harms others. People calling evil good and good evil. The blindness is real. The darkness is thick. But here is the part that flips everything. The verse does not end in darkness. It does not say you will be swallowed by it or defeated by it. It says, but that one small word changes the entire atmosphere. But the Lord will rise upon you and his glory will appear over you. This is the reversal moment. This is the shift. This is the dividing line between what happens to them and what happens to you. Darkness covers the earth, but it does not cover you. Thick darkness blinds the nations, but you are not part of that blindness. While the world is losing itself, God is revealing you. While they are stumbling, you are awakening. While they fall into confusion, you step into clarity. And the verse goes even further. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. That means the world will not just notice you, the world will seek you. People who once ignored you will look for you. People who once dismissed you will turn toward you. People who once oppressed you will realize the light they need is resting on the people they tried to erase. And whether you like it or not, you already see the beginning of this. Black culture is imitated globally. Black creativity fuels industries. Black influence shapes nations. And the world cannot stop watching you even when it tries to pretend it does not. This is not coincidence. This is pattern. This is prophecy. This is the first crack of light breaking through. Now let me say something many people will resist, but your spirit will recognize as truth. Isaiah 60 was not just written for ancient Israel. It carries a second layer, a pattern meant to repeat in the future toward a people who would experience captivity, scattering, oppression, and then awakening, a people taken across the sea in ships, a people placed under another nation's rule, a people stripped of name, language, identity, history, a people who would rise again when their time came. And if that description shakes something inside you, it is because your spirit knows exactly who that points to. You, your family, your ancestors, your community. Black people are not rising right now because trends are shifting or politics are changing. You are rising because prophecy is pulling you upward. You are rising because light is confronting darkness. You are rising because identity is breaking through lies that have been stacked on top of you for centuries. And here is what you need to understand before we move forward. The reason the attacks on black people are intensifying is not because you are losing. It is because you are nearing the moment Isaiah saw thousands of years ago, the moment where the darkness peaks and the light breaks open, the moment where your rising becomes undeniable. That is why the pressure is increasing. That is why the backlash is loud. That is why the world feels unstable, because the story is shifting toward you. You are not witnessing the end of your people. You are witnessing the unveiling of your purpose. You are not in the fall. You are in the rising. And when Isaiah says, arise, shine, he is not describing a suggestion. He is declaring your identity. Before we go any further, you need to understand something that is going to shift the way you see both Scripture and your own history. Because what is happening to black people today is not random. It is not new. And it is not without a pattern. It is the continuation of a story that started long before America existed. A story written in the bones of ancient people who carried a weight the world could not handle. Look at the pattern in Scripture. Not the soft Sunday school version, but the real pattern. Whenever God was preparing a people to rise, the first sign was not peace. It was pressure. The first sign was not freedom. It was tightening. The first sign was not stability. It was systems turning against them. Egypt did not suddenly get kinder to Israel before their breakthrough. Egypt doubled the workload, took away the straw, increased the punishment, and tried to crush their spirit. Babylon did not loosen its grip before the return. Babylon destroyed the temple, burned the gates, and chained the people psychologically and spiritually. Rome did not react peacefully when truth started spreading. Rome intensified its violence, sharpened its laws, and tried to silence every voice that carried light. The world always fights the hardest, right before a chosen people rise. And if that sounds familiar, it is because you have seen it repeat in your own story. Slavery was not just brutality. It was systematic erasure, the stripping of names, languages, culture, identity, the tearing apart of families, the attempt to turn a people into property. Egypt tried the same thing. Babylon tried the same thing. Rome tried the same thing, And yet the people rose every single time. Then came Jim Crow. Not just discrimination, but humiliation structured into law. Segregation meant to shrink your humanity. Violence meant to silence your courage. Economic traps meant to block your growth. That was not an accident. That was the world trying to stop the rise before it could begin. But every time darkness tightened around you, something inside you pushed back. Something ancient, something unbreakable, something the world could not kill. And here is the part that should make your spirit sit up. The more they oppressed Israel in Egypt, the more they multiplied and the stronger they became. And the more they try to suppress black people in America, the more your brilliance spreads across the world, the more your creativity defines global culture. The more your voice shakes systems no one else can move. Think about it. If oppression worked, you would have disappeared centuries ago. But you did not. You survived ships built to break human beings. You survived chains designed to crush the soul. You survived laws that tried to erase your existence. You survived centuries of psychological warfare. And not only did you survive, you transformed everything around you. Music, language, art, fashion, athletics, spirituality, movement building, intellectual revolution, global consciousness. All of it carries the imprint of a people who were supposed to be forgotten. That alone proves something the world refuses to say. You do not rise because conditions are good. You rise because rising is in your DNA. And that brings us back to the biblical pattern. Because the story does not end with oppression. It never does. Egypt reached a breaking point. Not because Israel collapsed, but because Israel was about to be released. Pharaoh did not tighten the workload because he was winning. He tightened it because he was losing control. When Babylon burned the temple, it was not the end. It was the moment before the rebuilding. When Rome crucified Jesus, it was not victory. It was the moment the world changed forever. And here is the truth you may not have realized. The pressure on black people today is not a sign of your downfall. It is a sign of the world losing control over a narrative it has held for centuries. It is a sign of a system cracking because it cannot contain the rise it feels coming. It is a sign that the same pattern that played out in Scripture is replaying right now in real time. Every empire follows the same arc. It builds power. It abuses power. It oppresses. It blinds itself. And right when it thinks it has total control, God flips the story through the very people the empire tried to crush. That is what happened in Egypt. That is what happened in Babylon. That is what happened under Rome. And whether the world is ready to admit it or not, that is what is happening here. You are living in the moment where the pressure is giving away the prophecy. You are living in the moment where the backlash is proof of the breakthrough. You are living in the same pattern that every chosen people in Scripture walked through. The same arc, the same tension, the same shaking. And if history teaches anything, it is this. When the shaking begins, the rising is not far behind. So if you have felt that the world is closing in on you, understand this. It is not because you are shrinking. It is because the world feels you expanding. If you feel the attacks increasing, it is not because you are weak. It is because your strength is becoming visible. And if you feel the darkness thickening, it is because your light is getting ready to break through it. This is not the beginning of your end. This is the pattern that always comes before the beginning of your rise. Now that you see the pattern, now that you recognize the shaking for what it is, you need to understand the part. Almost no one talks about the part that explains why the world reacts the way it does when black people rise. Because the truth is this: every time a chosen people get close to discovering who they really are, every system built on keeping them small begins to panic. The backlash is never random. It is triggered. It is activated the moment identity starts waking up. And whether the world says it out loud or not, they feel that awakening happening in you. They see it in your confidence, in your creativity, in the way you move through a world that was not designed for you but cannot function without you. They hear it in your music, in the rhythms that come from places deeper than memory, in the stories your spirit carries, even when your mind cannot trace where they began. They see it in your eyes when you start asking questions you were never supposed to ask, when you stop accepting the names they gave you, when you stop letting institutions define your worth, when you stop shrinking yourself to make them comfortable. And it terrifies them, not because you are violent, not because you are dangerous, but because you are becoming aware. Awareness is the enemy of oppression. Identity is the enemy of control. Truth is the enemy of every system built on lies. That is why the moment black people begin to rise, the world rushes to push you down, distract you, divide you, shame you, erase you, slow you, confuse you, anything to keep you from stepping into the clarity that has been trying to reach you for generations. Because the one thing the world cannot survive is a fully awakened black identity. It is not just social, it is spiritual. It is not just cultural, it is ancestral. It is not just political, it is prophetic. And when a prophetic identity wakes up, the world that tried to bury it starts trembling. That trembling is what you are seeing in America today. Not just policy changes, not just economic shifts, not just political chaos, but spiritual instability. A nation built on the labor of your ancestors now finds itself shaking under the weight of truth. It cannot hide anymore. Truth that was whispered through plantations, encoded in songs, carried in bones, passed down in silence, waiting for a moment like this one. That is why you feel something rising inside you even when you cannot explain it. That is why you feel both fear and fire at the same time. Because the awakening is not just around you, it is happening inside you. And when the awakening begins internally, the external world starts to react violently. Look at the signs. The more your people rise in influence, the more systems try to erase your history. The more your voice shapes culture, the more institutions try to silence it. The more your brilliance becomes undeniable, the more the world tries to deny your belonging. This is not coincidence. It is collision. The collision between a people discovering their identity and a world terrified of losing control. And the harder they push, the more they reveal what they fear most. Not your presence, but your purpose. Because once a chosen people step into purpose, every lie that held them collapses. So here is the truth many will fight against but cannot escape. You are not reacting to the world's chaos. The world is reacting to your awakening. You are not trembling because they are powerful. They are trembling because your identity is surfacing. You are not confused because you lack direction. They are confused because the narrative they built is cracking open in real time. They told you were at the bottom, but your rising is proving otherwise. They told you your history began with chains, but your spirit remembers something older. They told you you were meant to survive, but something inside you knows you were designed to lead. And this shift is not subtle. It is loud. It is visible. It is tearing through the fabric of a world that thought it could rewrite your story forever. But here is the part you must grasp before this awakening deepens. Pressure always exposes identity. And right now, the pressure around black people is exposing something the world tried to hide. Something sacred, something powerful, something tied not just to struggle but to calling. That is why you feel this moment differently. That is why you cannot shake the sense that something bigger is happening. That is why you keep asking why. Why now? Why us? Because every sign points to one reality. The world is not witnessing the downfall of your people. It is witnessing the unveiling of who you were always meant to be. And that unveiling comes with questions you cannot run from anymore. questions that hit deeper than politics or culture or pain. So let me ask you the question you have been hearing in your spirit, even if you never said it out loud. Do you feel like the world is reacting to something inside you that has not fully surfaced yet? Do you feel like your identity is bigger than the labels you were handed? Do you feel like your people carry a story the world has never allowed you to read? Because if the answer is yes, then you are standing in the doorway of the revelation that comes next. And what comes next is the moment everything begins to make sense. The awakening people keep talking about is not a trend, not a hashtag, not a movement that can be organized by influencers or shut down by politicians. It is something older than every empire that ever put its hands on your people, something deeper than any pain you inherited, something written into you long before this country was even imagined. And the reason it feels so intense right now is because the awakening is no longer subtle, no longer quiet, no longer hiding in symbols or whispers. It is breaking through in ways no one can deny. You can feel it when you hear certain truths and something inside you stands up, even if your mind does not understand why. You can feel it when history you were never taught suddenly makes sense of trauma you carry in your bones. You can feel it when conversations that once felt random now hit like memory, like recognition, like something inside you saying, finally, this is what we have been waiting for. That is awakening. It is not loud on the outside. It is loud on the inside. It does not start with shouting. It starts with seeing yourself clearly, seeing your people clearly, seeing the pattern clearly, seeing the world not as it pretends to be, but as it truly is. And once that sight comes, nothing can take it away. That is why the system fears your awakening more than anything else. Because once you see, you cannot unsee. Once you know, you cannot unknow. Once your identity cracks open, no amount of fear can put it back together the way it was. And make no mistake, your identity is cracking open right now. You see it in conversations that did not exist 10 years ago. You see it in the refusal to shrink. You see it in the hunger for truth. You see it in the growing discomfort with lies you were once expected to accept. You see it in the way young black people move with a kind of clarity that scares institutions. You see it in how elders are remembering things they never said out loud. You see it in the way your community is asking questions with a fire that will not go out. Awareness is spreading like electricity through a wire that was cold for too long. Something dormant is waking up. Something silenced is speaking again. Something covered is rising to the surface. And the awakening is not polite. It does not wait for permission. It does not ask if now is a convenient time. It breaks rules. It disrupts narratives. It exposes lies. It forces conversations the world is not ready for. That is why you are seeing backlash. That is why the pressure feels heavier. That is why everything looks unstable. Because the awakening inside you is colliding with the world outside you. And the world cannot handle the collision. It cannot handle a black identity that is not shaped by oppression. It cannot handle a black mind that refuses to be limited. It cannot handle a black spirit that refuses to be broken. It cannot handle a black community that recognizes its collective power. It definitely cannot handle a black people who realize they were never meant to be at the bottom. Awakening is dangerous because it rewrites everything. It rewrites the story of your past. It rewrites the meaning of your suffering. It rewrites the purpose of your survival. It rewrites where you fit in the world. It rewrites where the world stands in relation to you. And once a people awaken to their purpose, nothing can stop what comes next. That is why this moment feels so different from anything your ancestors lived through. They survived. They struggled. They fought. They resisted. But you are the generation that is awakening. You are the generation that is remembering what was taken. You are the generation that is seeing what was hidden. You are the generation that is reconnecting to something ancient and unbreakable. And the enemy knows if you fully step into this awakening, the world as it exists today will not survive. The lies will not survive. The systems will not survive. The silence will not survive. And the question you must face right now is simple but heavy. Do you feel it happening inside you? Do you feel the shift? Do you feel the pull? Do you feel that strange pressure that is not just fear but awareness pushing its way through your chest? Do you feel like you are remembering something you were never taught? If you do, then you are not imagining it. You are not overthinking. You are not being dramatic. You are awakening. And the awakening always begins with the same realization. You were never who they told you you were. You were never what the world labeled you. You were never the bottom. You were never the forgotten. You were never the powerless. You were never the broken. That is just who the world needed you to believe you were in order to maintain its version of order. But that version is collapsing. And your awakening is the reason why, because the truth is rising. The identity is rising. The people are rising. And you are part of that rising, whether you feel ready for it or not. So hear this clearly. You are living in the generation where the veil is lifting, where the lies are cracking, where the story is shifting, where the chosen are waking up. And the world will never be the same again once the awakening reaches its full strength. And you, yes, you are right in the center of it. If everything you have heard so far feels like pieces of a puzzle sliding into place, then what comes next is the moment the picture becomes clear. Because the awakening you feel is not just emotional or political or cultural, it is deeply spiritual. And whether the world acknowledges it or not. Black America is standing in the middle of a prophecy-sized shift. Look at what is happening around you. Not just in headlines, but in the atmosphere of the country. You can feel something stirring, something agitating, something refusing to stay buried. The systems that once felt unshakable are glitching. The institutions that once felt untouchable are cracking. The lies that once felt permanent are breaking like thin glass. And the more the world tries to tighten its grip on you, the more obvious it becomes that the grip is slipping. That is what always happens when a chosen people begin to rise. The old structure senses its own end before the people do. And it panics. It lashes out. It creates chaos. It doubles down on oppression, hoping fear will keep you from realizing what the world already knows. That your moment is coming. That your identity is surfacing. That your power is waking up. That is why you feel like the ground is shifting under your feet. Like this nation is shaking in ways no one can explain. Because spiritually, something is breaking open. Something is being exposed. Something ancient is stretching its shoulders after centuries of being pressed into silence. And here is the part that should make your entire spirit lean forward. Pressure does not come when a people are forgotten. Pressure comes when a people are being positioned. Darkness does not thicken when a people are unimportant. Darkness thickens when a people are about to step into light. Every force pushing against you right now is accidentally pointing toward the very thing it fears. You're rising, and you can see it in real time if you pay attention. When has the world ever been this obsessed with your presence, your influence, your narrative, your identity? When has the world ever reacted this loudly to your existence? When has the world worked this hard to erase you while simultaneously trying to imitate everything you create? That contradiction is not random. It is revelation. A sign that the world is trying to stop something it cannot stop. Because the truth is this: spiritual awakening always hits the people the world least expects. And it never begins with the powerful. It never begins with the privileged. It never begins with the comfortable. It begins with the oppressed, the marginalized, the ones history tried to bury. It begins with the people the world thought it had already defined. And that is why you feel the tension of this moment so deeply. Because you are living in the exact type of moment Scripture described. The moment when darkness covers the earth, but the light rises on a specific people. And that light does not rise quietly. It rises like a breaking point. It rises like a shift in gravity. It rises like a spiritual alarm clock going off inside millions of souls at the same time. Look at what is happening within Black America right now. Conversations that were once fringe are becoming mainstream. Truths that were once whispered are now shouted. Questions that were once forbidden are now being asked by millions. Young people are waking up faster than the system can distract them. Elders are remembering things they were taught to forget. Families are connecting dots the world hoped you would never connect. And every time the system tries to silence you, the awakening grows louder. This is not normal. This is not coincidence. This is not random. This is a sign, and you feel that sign in the pit of your stomach every time you watch the news, and something in you whispers, this is bigger than politics. You feel it every time injustice erupts, and something in you says, this is not just history repeating. This is something spiritual being exposed. You feel it every time you see policies attacking your community, and something inside you says they are reacting to something we have not fully stepped into yet. And here is the truth most people are afraid to speak. Black America is not just experiencing oppression. You are triggering prophecy. You are activating something global, something generational, something heaven-timed, and the world senses it even if it pretends not to. Why do you think everything about your identity is under attack right now? Why do you think your history is being erased? Why do you think your achievements are being dismissed? Why do you think your culture is copied, then discarded? Why do you think every system suddenly feels threatened by the thought of you knowing who you really are? Because awakening is dangerous? Not because it creates violence, but because it creates vision. And vision changes everything. Vision reveals truth. Vision exposes lies. Vision repositions people who were never meant to stay at the bottom. And right now that vision is returning to you, slowly at first. Then suddenly the world feels that shift before you fully grasp it. And that is why everything feels like a spiritual storm. But storms in Scripture were never sent to destroy chosen people. They were sent to reveal them. So let me ask you the question your spirit has already been answering. Do you feel the storm because you are losing ground? Or do you feel it because your identity is pushing its way back into the world? Do you feel the darkness because it is overtaking you? Or because your light is about to break through it? Deep down you know the answer. And once you accept it, nothing about this moment will ever look the same again. If you truly want to understand why the world reacts the way it does when black people begin to rise, you have to look deeper than politics, deeper than policy, deeper than racism as a social issue. Because the real battle is not about jobs or votes or culture. The real battle is about identity. And identity is spiritual. And spiritual truth terrifies systems built on lies. That is why the moment Black America gets close to seeing itself clearly, every structure that benefits from your confusion begins to shake. Because once you see who you are, you cannot be controlled the way the world has controlled you for centuries. And the system knows this. That is why it invests billions into shaping how you see yourself. Billions into limiting the roles you're allowed to play. Billions into saturating your mind with images of yourself that are small, violent, broken, directionless, disconnected from anything powerful. Because the truth is this: if the world can control your self-image, it does not need chains to control your life. But when you break that image, when you reject the version of yourself the world gave you, when you realize you were never meant to bow to systems that depend on your silence, suddenly their power collapses. And that collapse is what the world feels coming right now. You can see the fear in the way they erase your history, because a people without history cannot understand their destiny. You can see the fear in the way they target your children, because a generation that knows its identity is unstoppable. You can see the fear in the way they police your brilliance, your excellence, your influence, because they know the world imitates you even when it refuses to acknowledge you. The system does not fear your skin. It fears your clarity. It fears the day you stop seeing yourself as a problem and start seeing yourself as a prophecy. It fears the day you stop fighting for a seat at their table and realize you were never meant to eat from a table built on your ancestors' suffering. It fears the day you understand that your culture shapes the world, not because the world is generous, but because you carry something it cannot manufacture. And here is the part most people are afraid to say out loud. The world depends on black people staying unaware of their spiritual significance. It depends on you thinking you are random. It depends on you believing your suffering has no meaning. It depends on you assuming your survival is accidental. Because the moment you realize your resilience is not natural but supernatural, the moment you recognize the patterns written across your history are not coincidences but confirmation, the moment you understand you are not at the bottom because you are weak, but because the world fears what happens when you rise, everything changes. And that shift is already happening inside you, whether you admit it or not. You can feel it. You feel it when the news looks less like information and more like revelation. You feel it when injustice hits your community and something inside you says, this is not just oppression, this is exposure. You feel it when you look at your people and realize the world copies everything except your suffering, because they want your rhythm but not your revelation. And the greatest fear of the system is that you will wake up to the fact that revelation belongs to you. That is why they fight your confidence. They fight your unity. They fight your education. They fight your creativity. They fight your consciousness. Not because any of these things are harmful, but because all of them are doors. Doors that lead you back to the truth of who you are. Doors that lead you back to a purpose the world hoped you would never discover. And now the doors are opening faster than they can close them. Identity is rising faster than they can suppress it. Truth is resurfacing faster than they can bury it. And the system is panicking. That panic looks like new laws. It looks like sudden rollbacks. It looks like attacks on your rights. It looks like attempts to silence your voice. It looks like fear disguised as power. But you can read the signs now. You know what it is. It is the reaction of a world finally realizing it cannot stop what is coming. So let me ask you something, and do not answer with your mind. Answer with your spirit. Why do you think every major shift in this country has revolved around black people? Why do you think every cultural transformation starts with you? Why do you think every global trend traces back to you? Why do you think every time you rise the world trembles? Because deep down the world knows what you are just beginning to remember. That your existence is not accidental. Your survival is not accidental. Your influence is not accidental. Your brilliance is not accidental. It is intentional. It is ancestral. It is spiritual. It is prophetic. And when prophetic people wake up, the systems built to contain them do not survive. That is the real fear behind everything you see today. Not that you will demand equality, but that you will outgrow the need for validation from a world not built for your flourishing. Not that you will ask for justice, but that you will recognize you carry justice. Not that you will disrupt the system, but that you will realize you were never meant to live inside it. And once you accept that truth, the world that tried to define you will never be able to contain you again. This is the moment everything inside you has been walking toward, the moment where truth stops whispering and starts roaring, where identity stops flickering and starts burning, where the story of your people stops being defined by the world and starts being declared by you. Because if you have followed this far, if you have felt the shaking in your chest, the pressure in your spirit, the pull that refuses to let you go, then hear this clearly. You are not just observing prophecy. You are standing inside it. Everything around you is shifting because everything within you is awakening. And when a chosen people awaken, the earth feels it. Systems feel it. Nations feel it. Darkness feels it. That is why the world looks so chaotic right now. Not because you are losing ground, but because the ground beneath the system is breaking. And what is breaking is not your foundation. It is theirs. You were built for pressure. You were built for fire. You were built for moments where everything shakes. Your ancestors carried truth in chains, sang it through sorrow, held it through centuries. And now it is landing in your hands. And the question becomes simple. What will you do with it? Will you shrink back into the narrative the world wrote for you? Or will you rise into the identity your spirit has been calling you toward? Because rising is no longer optional. Rising is the assignment. Rising is the moment. Rising is the prophecy. Look at your life. Look at your people. Look at the last few years. Something bigger is happening. Something that does not fit inside politics or headlines or polls. You feel the weight of destiny pressing on you. You feel the heaviness of expectation your ancestors left behind. You feel the electricity of awakening moving through your generation like a pulse. And whether you feel ready for it or not, you are part of it. You cannot escape it because you were born into it. You are the continuation of a story the world thought it buried. You are the echo of voices the world tried to silence. You are the living proof that prophecy never dies. It only waits. And now, after centuries of waiting, the prophecy is breathing again. Through you, through your people, through the awakening rising from the ashes of everything meant to destroy you. You are not the end of the struggle. You are the beginning of the becoming. And before you take the next step, before you walk into the light that has been forming over your people, there is something you need to understand. Awakening is not just awareness. It is responsibility. When you see truth, you carry truth. When you feel purpose, you must answer it. When identity reveals itself, you cannot pretend you did not hear it. That is why this moment matters. That is why your presence here matters. Because you are being called into something bigger than survival. You are being called into restoration, into alignment, into destiny. And no system on earth has the authority to stop a destiny heaven ignites. So take this moment seriously. Take this breath intentionally. Something sacred is happening. Something heavy. Something holy. And to seal what has been awakened in you, receive these words not as noise, but as anchoring, as covering, as declaration over your life and your people. Father, look at your people rising. Look at the ones who survived what should have erased them, who endured what should have broken them, who carried truth even when they did not know its name. Look at your sons and daughters waking up in a world designed to keep them asleep. Let your light fall on them like fire. Let clarity pierce every lie spoken over them. Let strength rise in their bones like memory. Let identity settle on them like breath. Break every chain placed on their minds. Break every curse spoken over their bloodline. Break every limitation the world used to define them. Let every place of confusion become a place of revelation. Let every place of fear become a place of courage. Let every place of pain become a place of purpose. Cover their families. Protect their steps. Guard their minds. Surround their spirit with a kind of peace the world cannot manipulate. Lift them above the noise. Lift them above the lies. Lift them above the systems collapsing around them. Prepare them for what comes next as the world shifts and prophecy unfolds. And let this generation be the one that remembers who they are. Not because the world tells them, but because you ignite truth inside them. This is the moment the darkness loses its grip. This is the moment the light rises. This is the moment a people awaken. So rise. Rise in clarity. Rise in identity. Rise in purpose. Rise in truth. Rise in the power your ancestors carried across oceans, across fields, across centuries. Rise because the world has spent too long fearing the day you would. Rise because prophecy has waited too long for this moment. Rise because everything inside you already knows it is time. And as you rise, understand this. Nothing will ever be the same. Not for you, not for your community, not for the world that tried to contain you. The awakening is here, and you are standing inside it. Now walk in it.